I'd always prided myself on being a good husband, a reliable man. ID worked hard to build a life with my wife, Katie, ever since we got married. We bought this house together in a quiet suburban neighborhood, filled with friendly faces and the kind of neighbors who drop by with casseroles during the holidays. Life was supposed to be simple, maybe too simple. There were the usual routines: work, the occasional weekend trip, lazy Sunday afternoons watching TV. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Or so I thought. I hadn't seen it coming. The signs were subtle at first. The way Katie started staying late at her sister's place more often. Little things like not feeling like cooking dinner or spending more time on the phone. But I told myself I was overthinking. After all, she had a lot on her plate with her job, the kids, keeping up with everything. And then came that one evening, a Thursday, when everything changed. I was home early that day, hadn't planned on it, but I was glad I was. I walked through the front door, kicking off my shoes, a familiar weight lifting from my shoulders as I entered our home. It was supposed to be a quiet evening, but the moment I stepped into the hallway, I felt something in the air, a different kind of energy, something that didn't belong. I called out for Katie, but there was no response. I figured she was in the back, maybe on the phone with her sister or something. I walked past our bedroom, and that's when I saw it. A shirt, a man's shirt, not mine. It was draped casually across the back of the chair by our window, the collar hanging just so, like it had been thrown there in haste. I stood frozen, staring at it for a moment. I knew it didn't belong to me. I would have recognized it, the color, the fabric. I could almost hear my heart beat faster. There was a pressure building in my chest, something heavy and suffocating. I walked closer, my fingers trembling, and reached down to touch it. It was fresh, warm, as if it had been worn recently. I didn't have to guess what was going on. I already knew, or at least, I had a sinking feeling that I wasn't ready to face. I opened the door to the bathroom, half expecting to find Katie getting ready for something. But when I looked in the mirror, there was nothing unusual, just her makeup scattered on the counter and a hint of perfume hanging in the air. But there was something off about the room, something I couldn't put my finger on. I turned back to the bedroom and walked over to the closet. And that's when I saw the watch. It wasn't mine. It was a chunky silver watch with a deep blue face, something that screamed money and status. Katie knew I didn't wear anything like that. I didn't care for flashy accessories. The more I looked at it, the angrier I became. This was no accident. This was deliberate. I stood there for a few more seconds, my thoughts racing. The knot in my stomach tightened. I thought about the times Katie had been acting distant, how she would pull away when I tried to touch her or talk to her. She'd become evasive, like I didn't matter anymore. I tried to brush it off. But now everything made sense. I was furious, no doubt. But there was something else too. A strange mix of confusion and jealousy. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, what had been happening right under my nose. I had to know. I had to confront her. But when Katie walked in a few minutes later, smiling, her hair all done up like she had just come back from somewhere, I wasn't sure what to say. How do you ask someone about something like this without showing all the anger and suspicion that had been building in me? How do you ask when you already know the answer? She didn't even notice the shirt at first, too busy giving me a quick peck on the cheek as she passed by. I watched her. Everything about her was wrong at that moment. The way she moved, the way she looked at me, like I wasn't even in the same world as her. "What for dinner?" she asked, opening the fridge. I didn't respond right away. The words wouldn't come. I stood there, staring at the watch, the shirt, the reality of the situation settling in. The anger was building again, bubbling up like a volcano. I wasn't just hurt. I wasn't just confused. I was enraged. This wasn't a simple mistake. This wasn't some innocent misunderstanding. She had betrayed me. And the man who'd done it, he was right next door. Finally, I spoke. "Whose shirt is this?" I asked, my voice low, controlled. I didn't want to scream. Not yet. I wasn't sure I had the words for what I was feeling. Katie turned, her face pale. "What?" I walked over to the chair where the shirt lay. This isn't mine, and I don't wear watches like this." "Whose are they?" She looked at the shirt, her eyes flickering for a moment before meeting mine. I don't know. Maybe it's one of the kids' things." I cut her off. "Don't lie to me, Katie. I know you're not that careless." Her eyes widened. And for the first time, I saw fear in her gaze. What are you talking about? I'm talking about this shirt. This watch. What's going on, Katie? Her face flushed. She turned away, looking at the floor, not able to meet my gaze. It's not what you think. I felt my hands ball into fists, but I kept myself in check. Just barely. Then tell me what it is. What's going on? She sighed deeply, then faced me again. Please don't do this. And just like that, I knew. There was no going back. She stood there, her back slightly hunched as if she were waiting for the storm to hit. I could see it in her eyes, the way she hesitated before speaking. She was trying to figure out how to protect herself, to salvage what little of our marriage was left. But the words wouldn't come, not the way she wanted. And in that silence, I was already losing patience. I'm waiting, Katie, I said, the calmness in my voice betraying the boiling rage inside. What's going on? She took a deep breath, running her fingers through her hair, then lowered her gaze to the floor again. I made a mistake, she muttered, almost too quietly for me to hear. I clenched my jaw, but I kept my voice steady. A mistake? Really? A shirt, a watch. You called it a mistake. I took a step toward her, feeling the weight of every word like a punch in the gut. Don't insult my intelligence. I know what's going on. Katie glanced up at me, her lips trembling slightly. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. I could see the panic rising in her face reddening, her eyes darting around as if she were searching for an escape. But there was no escape. Who is he? I demanded, unable to keep the fury out of my voice any longer. I know it's not some random guy. It's someone I know, isn't it? Tell me, Katie, who is he? She took another step back, her hand instinctively reaching for the doorframe, as if she might use it for support. You don't understand, she said, her voice trembling now. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I watched her, searching her face for any hint of truth, but all I saw was guilt. And I hated that. I hated how easily she thought she could lie to me, how she could stand there with those pathetic excuses. I'm not an idiot, I said, my voice low and threatening. Tell me who he is. Her lips pressed together, and for a moment, I thought she might break. Maybe she would admit it, maybe she wouldn't. But I wasn't going to wait around to find out. Is it our neighbor? The words came out before I even realized I was asking. But when I said them, her entire demeanor shifted. Her eyes widened, and she took another step back. No, she whispered, shaking her head frantically. No, it's not like that. Don't lie to me, I barked, taking another step toward her, my chest heaving with anger. I know it's him. I know it is. I've seen the way you two look at each other. The way you act when he comes over. Don't deny it anymore. Katie stumbled, her hand reaching for the nearest chair to steady herself. It's not what you think, she said, her voice barely above a whisper now. It was a mistake. I never meant for it to happen. I felt the anger welling up inside me, pushing me closer to the edge. The words I wanted to say, the things I wanted to do, seemed so overwhelming in that moment. But I still couldn't believe it. My own wife betraying me with someone I saw almost every day. Someone I trusted. Someone I considered a friend. It's not what I think, I repeated, stepping closer to her. My voice was a low growl now, barely controlled. Then what is it? What's going on, Katie? She took a deep breath, her eyes not quite meeting mine. It started with small things, she admitted, her voice shaky. He was just there for me when you weren't. When you were busy with work or just distant. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I couldn't contain the laugh that escaped me, bitter and hollow. I was distant? Are you serious right now? You couldn't come to me with your problems, so you decided to sleep with our damn neighbor? Katie winced, like my words had struck her harder than she expected. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want this. Too late for that, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. My mind was reeling, but in a strange way, I almost felt numb. How could this be real? How could my own wife betray me with him? Of all people. Katie tried to step closer, but I held up a hand to stop her. Don't. Just don't. She stopped, her eyes searching my face for something. An apology, an understanding, some way to fix what she had broken. But I couldn't look at her anymore. Not like this. I never meant to hurt you. she said again, the desperation in her voice rising. I never wanted any of this. It just happened. I shook my head. You don't get it? This isn't just some mistake. This isn't something you can sweep under the rug and pretend like it never happened. This is real, Katie. It's real, and you've crossed a line I can't just forget about. Katie's face crumpled. She looked like she was going to break right then and there. Her lips parted as if she were going to say something else, but no words came. The silence between us grew, thick and suffocating, until I couldn't stand it anymore. I want you to leave, I said, my voice steady but cold. I want you to leave, Katie. Right now. Her face twisted in shock, like she hadn't expected me to say that. What? You. Leave. Now. I repeated, the words coming out sharp and final. For a moment, Katie just stood there, staring at me, like she couldn't process what was happening. But then, her shoulders slumped, and she nodded weakly. Okay, she said softly, almost as if she were agreeing to something inevitable. I'll leave. But please, let's try to work through this. But I wasn't listening anymore. The only thing I could hear was the sound of her footsteps as she walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the shirt, the watch, and the bitter taste of betrayal in my mouth. I stood there for a long time after she left, staring at the mess we'd made of everything. There was no going back from this. I could still feel the air in the room growing colder, the silence so thick it felt like a physical thing pressing down on me. The whole house was quiet now, too quiet. It was like the walls themselves were waiting for something to happen, and I didn't know what to do. What could I do? Katie had left, but the damage had already been done. The betrayal was there, in the things I had found, in the things she had admitted. I didn't know how I was supposed to feel, or what I was supposed to do next. I just knew that things would never be the same again. I walked around the house, trying to distract myself, but it was impossible. Everywhere I turned, there was something that reminded me of her. The pictures on the walls, the framed memories of a life we had shared, now stained with the knowledge that it had all been a lie. I made my way to the kitchen, hoping that maybe something as simple as a glass of water would help clear my mind, but the refrigerator door felt heavy in my hand. The weight of it felt like it was holding me down, like everything in my life was suddenly too much to bear. I slammed the door shut and stood there for a moment, staring at nothing in particular. I needed to calm down, to think through what I was going to do. I couldn't keep going in circles like this, like a dog chasing its tail. I needed answers. I needed to understand why. Why him? Why now? It wasn't just the affair that got to me. It was the fact that she had done it with someone who was so close. I kept thinking back to the times we'd spent together, laughing with our neighbors, sharing meals and drinks, thinking everything was fine. And the whole time, Katie had been hiding something from me. Something that had been happening right under my nose. The man, our neighbor, Jake, was someone I had trusted. Hell, he was the one I had helped fix his car last summer when it broke down. We had spent evenings drinking beers together, talking about nothing and everything at the same time. And now, he was the one who had crossed the line, the one who had taken what wasn't his to take. The thought of it made me sick. I stood there in the kitchen, my hands gripping the counter as I took slow, measured breaths. My thoughts were racing, but I couldn't seem to focus on any one thing. I couldn't decide whether I wanted to confront Jake next or just leave everything behind and never look back. I wasn't sure what was worse, the thought of seeing him again, knowing what had happened, or confronting the woman I had spent years with, who had thrown it all away for. What? A few stolen moments of passion? Was it that simple? I couldn't let it go. I couldn't just forget. I had to make her understand, make them both understand what they had taken from me. From us. I knew what I had to do. But it wasn't as simple as just walking out the door and confronting Jake. I couldn't just storm over there, point my finger, and make him feel the same betrayal I did. No, it had to be more calculated, more controlled. I had to make him regret ever laying his hands on her, ever thinking for a second that he could have something of mine. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking for a moment, but I steadied myself. I had no time to waste. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to wait around for them to come to me. I sent a quick message to Katie's phone, knowing she'd be reading it in minutes. We need to talk. Now. It was short, direct, and to the point. I wasn't in the mood for anything else. There was no room for explanations or apologies. I had already heard enough of those to last a lifetime. I sat down in the living room and waited. Time seemed to drag on forever as I stared at the clock, watching the minutes tick away. It wasn't even the waiting that was the worst part. It was the anticipation, the anxiety of knowing that whatever was coming next was going to change everything. Eventually, Katie's car pulled into the driveway. I stood up, my muscles tense, every nerve in my body firing. I heard her footsteps before I even saw her, the click of her heels against the pavement, the sound of the front door opening and closing, her breathing as she came into the house. I didn't look at her right away. I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to hold on to whatever control I had left. "Are we really doing this?" she asked quietly, standing in the doorway to the living room. I turned to face her, my expression unreadable. "Yes, we're doing this." Katie walked into the room slowly, her movements cautious, almost hesitant. "I didn't think you'd want to talk after. I don't care what you thought." I cut her off, my voice sharp and final. "You've made your choices. Now, we're going to talk about what happens next." She swallowed hard, then stepped closer, trying to bridge the distance between us. But I wasn't going to let her in, not yet. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know what I was doing." I shook my head. "You knew exactly what you were doing, Katie. Don't lie to me. I saw the watch. I saw the shirt. You knew exactly what you were doing." Her eyes filled with tears, and for the briefest moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered. I remembered what she had done, what she had taken from me, and any sympathy I had vanished. "I don't know how to fix this," she said softly, wiping her eyes. "I can't undo what I've done, but I want to try. Please, just let me explain." I looked at her, the anger still simmering inside of me. She didn't get to explain. She didn't get to talk her way out of this. But there was one thing I had to know, one thing that still burned in my mind. "Was it worth it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Was it worth throwing everything we had away?" She didn't answer right away, and when she did, her voice was barely audible. "I don't know. I don't know anymore." And just like that, the last shred of hope I had for us died. Katie had made her choice. Now, I had to make mine. I couldn't just stand there anymore, waiting for some kind of miracle to change what was already broken. The house felt like it was closing in on me, the weight of everything hanging in the air, thick and suffocating. It felt like there was no escape, no way out. Every corner of the house was a reminder of how naive I had been, how I had trusted her, how I had let my guard down when I shouldn't have. Katie stood in front of me, still clutching at the last remnants of our life together, trying to hold on to something that was already slipping through her fingers. Her eyes were filled with tears, but I couldn't bring myself to care anymore. I wasn't sure I ever could again. I turned away, walking to the window to look outside. The night was quiet, peaceful even. It was hard to believe that anything had changed when everything outside seemed so normal, so untouched by the mess inside my head. Katie's voice cut through the silence again, softer this time. "I don't want to lose you. I'm sorry. I never wanted it to go this far. Please don't walk away from me." I turned back to her, my face a mask of controlled anger. "You already lost me, Katie. You lost me the moment you let someone else into our bed, into our life." The words were harsh, but they had to be. If I softened now, I'd only be doing what she wanted, letting her off the hook. She didn't deserve that. Not after everything. She reached out for me, but I stepped back, putting distance between us. "Don't touch me," I snapped, my voice more forceful than I had intended. "Not after what you did. I can't. I can't even look at you right now." Katie's face crumpled, and I saw something, regret, maybe guilt, flicker in her eyes, but it didn't change anything. It wasn't enough. The silence that followed felt like it would never end. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to do anything that would get the weight off my chest. But I stayed still, my fists clenched at my sides, my heart pounding in my ears. The air was too thick with tension, too thick with the knowledge that everything I had thought I knew about my life, about her, was a lie. She spoke again, her voice shaking. "I didn't want to hurt you, I swear. Jake, he was there when I needed someone. He made me feel like I mattered, like I was more than just your wife. I know it's wrong, I do. But it's not just black and white, you know. The words hit me like a slap, but I didn't flinch. So what? You're telling me that you did this because you felt neglected? Because I wasn't paying enough attention to you. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. It wasn't like that. It wasn't about you. Not really. It was about me. I got caught up in something, in someone, and now I don't know how to fix it. But I'll do anything to make this right. I shook my head, incredulous. You don't get it, do you? It's not about fixing it anymore. It's about what you did, what you let happen. I don't know who you are anymore. Katie opened her mouth, but no words came out. She just stood there, looking at me like I was someone she didn't recognize either. I could see the desperation in her eyes, but it wasn't enough to change anything. I turned and started walking toward the door. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay in that house any longer. I needed space. I needed air. I needed to get away from her, away from everything that reminded me of the life we once had. Please don't leave, she called out, her voice filled with a mixture of fear and pleading. We can talk. We can fix this. I'm begging you. I stopped in my tracks, my hand on the doorknob, and glanced back at her one last time. You had your chance, Katie. You had your chance to fix it before it ever got this far. I can't just forget what you've done. I left the house, slamming the door behind me. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The cool night air hit me like a slap, and I stood there for a moment, letting the silence of the world around me settle in. The streetlights flickered in the distance, casting a soft glow on the empty road. It was so quiet, too quiet. I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. I didn't know where I was supposed to go or how I was supposed to feel. But what I did know was that I couldn't stay there in that house in that life. I needed to make a decision, a real one, and I needed to make it soon. The world outside my front door felt different now. I wasn't sure if it was because everything had changed or if it was because I had finally seen things for what they really were. But I wasn't going back. Not yet. Not until I had sorted this all out. I didn't know how to fix what was broken. But one thing was for sure, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not without a fight. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and anger, a mix of heated arguments and silence that filled the spaces between us like a suffocating fog. Katie tried to reach out, tried to explain, but I couldn't bring myself to listen anymore. The hurt, the betrayal, it all felt too fresh. Her apologies, her desperate attempts to make things right, they fell flat. Every word seemed hollow, like she was saying what she thought I needed to hear, rather than truly understanding the gravity of what she had done. I couldn't stop thinking about Jake, the man she'd gone to for comfort, the man she'd chosen over me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, that smug smile he always had whenever he'd wave at me across the yard, pretending to be the friendly neighbor. The thought of him in my home, in my bed, with my wife, it was unbearable. I didn't tell Katie where I was going, didn't explain why I had suddenly packed a bag and left. I just needed to get away, to breathe, to figure out how to even begin to process all of this. So I ended up in a dingy motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where the carpets were stained and the air smelled like stale cigarettes. It didn't matter. I needed to be alone. But even alone, I couldn't escape her. The calls kept coming. The texts kept buzzing my phone, each one more frantic than the last. She needed to see me. She wanted to talk. She couldn't live with herself anymore, couldn't live with the guilt. But I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I ever would be. One evening, as I sat in the small motel room, trying to sort through the mess in my head, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in my gut told me I should. It was a woman's voice, calm, almost too calm. "Hello," she said, almost cautiously. I didn't recognize the voice, but it had an edge to it, the kind of edge that made my stomach drop. "Who's this?" There was a long pause before she spoke again. "I'm Jake's girlfriend. I don't know how else to say this, but I think you need to know something about your wife." My mind immediately started a race. "What are you talking about?" "I think you've got the wrong idea," she continued, her voice almost eerily composed. "But I think it's time you heard the truth about Katie." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I was on edge, every muscle in my body tense. I leaned forward, gripping the edge of the small table in front of me. "What do you know about her?" "Well," she said, her voice dropping to a lower register, "Katie isn't the woman you think she is. You've been played, and Jake's not the only one she's been seeing. My heart sank as the words hit me, but I forced myself to stay calm. What do you mean? Who else? Another pause. This woman wasn't in a rush. It was almost like she was savoring the moment. Let's just say, your wife has a few secrets you don't know about. And I'm not the only one who's had her attention. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of everything that was crumbling around me. Who else, damn it? Tell me. Not just Jake, she repeated, her voice almost taunting now. But I think you've already figured that out. You should have paid more attention. I slammed the phone down, my mind reeling, but my heart, my instincts told me to go back. To confront her. The anger that had been simmering inside me for days, weeks, maybe even months, finally boiled over. The betrayal, the lies, it all came crashing down on me at once. Jake, another man. How many others were there? How many times had she lied to me? I grabbed my things and stormed out of the motel, getting into my car with no real destination in mind. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. I was done being the fool. It was time to make Katie see that there was no going back from this. When I got home, the house was eerily quiet. No sound of her voice. No sign of life. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just staring at the place that had once felt like a home. Now it just felt like a cage, a prison of my own making. I walked in, calling out her name, but there was no answer. I looked around, my gaze falling on the couch, the coffee table, the kitchen. Everything was exactly how I remembered it, but it was different now. It felt wrong. And then, as if on cue, I heard her footsteps coming from upstairs. Katie came down slowly, almost cautiously, as if she wasn't sure how to face me. She must have known something was coming. "Kyle," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I didn't think you'd come back. Why wouldn't I?" I snapped, my eyes narrowing as I took a step closer to her. "What? You thought I was just going to run off and forget about everything? You think I'm that stupid?" Her eyes welled up with tears, but I wasn't moved. "Not anymore. Kyle, please. Please listen to me. I've been trying to explain." "Explain?" I cut her off, my voice harsh. "What's left to explain, Katie? The lies? The cheating? What more is there to say?" She shook her head, the tears falling freely now. "I never meant for it to happen like this. I didn't know how to stop it. But I'm trying. I'm really trying. Please, don't leave me. I can't lose you. You already lost me," I said coldly, my words cutting like a knife. "I don't know who you are anymore." Katie reached for me, her hand trembling. "Kyle, please." I pulled away, my face hard. "You don't get it, do you? You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in the ruins of the life we had built together. This wasn't just about Jake anymore. It was about everything. The lies, the betrayal, the person she had become. I couldn't go back. Not now. And as I walked out of that house for what felt like the last time, I knew there was no turning back. I didn't go back to the house. I didn't call Katie. For the first time in a long while, I let the silence between us stretch out, untouched and unbroken. The weight of everything, the lies, the betrayal, pressed down on me. But there was a sense of relief, too, as if I had finally stepped away from something that had suffocated me for far too long. I stayed at a friend's house for a few days, not knowing what I was waiting for. Maybe for her to call, maybe for things to settle in my mind. I didn't know what I expected, but I didn't get it. No calls, no messages. She was silent, and that only added to the noise in my head. I couldn't understand why she wasn't trying harder. It was like she had given up. But then the message came, a text at 3 a.m., the glow from the screen pulling me out of an uneasy sleep. "Katie." It was the first time she'd reached out in days. "Kyle, please. I don't want to lose you. I've made mistakes, terrible ones, but I love you. I've always loved you." I read it twice, 3 times. Each word felt like a weight. The desperation in her words didn't move me like it once would have. It only made my anger burn deeper. She couldn't just erase what she'd done, not with a few sentences. It wasn't that easy. The phone buzzed again. Another text. This time, the words weren't pleading. "I've been talking to Jake. He's telling me things I don't want to hear. I know I've hurt you, but he's also been hiding things from you. I need you to understand. Please, I need you to see the whole picture." I put the phone down. Her words were like a knife twisting deeper. It wasn't just about Jake anymore. She was pulling me back in, trying to convince me that there was something bigger at play. She was trying to shift the blame, make me see it as some sort of misunderstanding. I wasn't falling for it. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that I was already one step ahead. The next morning, I drove back to the house. My mind was a whirlwind, but I was determined to find answers. Katie wasn't going to control the narrative anymore. I wasn't going to let her spin her web and trap me in it. When I got to the house, I found her sitting on the porch, the same place where we'd spent so many quiet evenings together before everything fell apart. She looked small, vulnerable even, but I wasn't fooled by her appearance. Not anymore. She was still the woman who had betrayed me, and no amount of tears or guilt could change that. I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, looking at her, and then I took a deep breath. "You think Jake's been hiding something from me?" I asked, my voice sharp. She didn't respond immediately, her gaze shifting away from mine, guilt flickering in her eyes. But I saw it. The hesitation, the cracks in her story. "I know he's been lying, Kyle," she said softly, almost too softly. "I don't know everything, but I know he has." I crossed my arms. "How convenient, Katie. You're not even trying to take responsibility for what happened. You're deflecting." "I'm not deflecting," she insisted, standing up suddenly, her hands shaking. "I've been doing everything I can to fix this. I've been trying to understand why I did what I did, but you don't see that. You just want to punish me." Her voice wavered, but I wasn't moved. I had heard it all before. The same excuses, the same promises. She was never going to change. "You think I want to punish you?" I said, my voice cold, emotionless. "I don't need to punish you. You've already done that to yourself." She flinched, the words stinging her more than I intended. But it was the truth. She had destroyed everything, and now she wanted me to save her, wanted me to fix things when all she had done was burn them down. "I just need you to believe me, Kyle," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, you can't just walk away from this. From me." For a moment, I almost considered it. I almost let myself believe that she might be telling the truth, that maybe we could work through this. But I didn't trust her anymore. I couldn't. "You don't get it," I replied, my words deliberate. "You don't get to ask for forgiveness when you've already broken everything we had." She opened her mouth to argue, but I raised my hand, silencing her. "I'm done," I said, the finality in my voice unmistakable. "I can't do this anymore, Katie. I've been living in your lies for too long." I turned and walked away from her, from everything. But just as I reached the gate, I heard her call my name, her voice raw with emotion. "Kyle, please don't go." I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I had already made my decision. I was done. And as I left the house for the last time, I realized something. I wasn't just walking away from her. I was walking away from the life I had built with her. The life that now felt like nothing more than a house of cards, ready to collapse under its own weight. But there was no turning back. Not now. The finality of it hit me harder than I expected. The life I knew, the home I thought was mine, it was all gone now. And all that was left was the messy aftermath, the tangled web of lies and deceit that I would never be able to untangle. But I would survive. I had to.